Hi. Quick tips for relationships in lockdown. Whew, here we go again, huh? It's only for 5 days so far. So it's not a long one, but actually there's been a couple of things come up for myself and some other people that I've spoken with. And maybe even especially because it's only 5 days, we kind of feel like we should be okay with it and there should be no issues. But, you know, being in a relationship and being forced to be with that person for any amount of days can really bring some challenges to the surface. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that. And I've got a couple of tips that really work. They work for me, and they might be things that you wouldn't have thought of before. So the first thing that I really want to mention is that, you know, we might think to ourselves, well, hang on a second, I've gone away with my partner for longer than 5 days and we had a great time and there was no issues. So why is it so hard right now? And that's because there is a difference between choosing to be with somebody solely for a certain length of time and being forced to, or finding yourself kind of forced into that situation. We can end up feeling really stuck. We can end up feeling really trapped. And I don't know about you, but feeling trapped is one of my greatest triggers. I hate feeling trapped. So already we can be on the back foot and our fight or flight response has been turned on. Now, when our fight or flight response is turned on, then of course we just simply can't relate with love. And add to that the pressure or tension of the external world and what's going on. Again, our fight or flight can be, fight, flight or freeze can be turned on. And so again, already we're on the back foot and not able to relate. So a couple of tips that I want to share with you. And again, this can be for those of us who are in this mini lockdown. It can be for people who are in a much longer lockdown, but this is really helpful for any situation where we find ourselves going to be solely with our partner, and or where our situation as a couple changes swiftly, especially if it changes without necessarily our consent. So the first thing is, and this is the most important thing and something that most of us probably haven't thought of, and that is to sit down together and decide what are our parameters here. What does this mean for us and our relationship, and how are we going to approach it? Hi, Emma. Nice to see you. And because, there are so many assumptions made. We're going along in our everyday life, doing things the way that we do, and we've got our rhythm and our structures, and some of them we know of and we've negotiated, but some of them we've just kind of fallen into and it's an unspoken. And so going into a new situation, we need to come up with new parameters that we agree to. And we might not even realize that we have our own kind of immediate interpretation of what that's going to look like. And I'll give you an example because it happened for me and my husband. We heard about it yesterday, and then we were driving home, and in my mind and in myself, I was kind of looking forward to it. I'm like, oh my God, 5 days of family time. We'll have to cancel a lot of things and we'll just have lots of time at home as a family, and it'll be so beautiful and it'll be slow and we'll be able to connect, and, we'll just stop. And then we were talking about it on the way home, and he mentioned something about my work day versus his work day and how could we swap this and that. And I just went, whoa, hang on a second. That completely rocked my reality. And I realized, I just made this internal assumption of what it meant. And in realizing that, I realized I had to have that conversation with him. And in doing so, I recognized that within himself, he's got one of his biggest weeks of the year ahead, where he has this really big project that he has to finalize. And for him, it's just not an option taking downtime. So for him, nothing really was going to change. It was going to be the same, which meant that for us, we have a child, a kinder-aged child. So no help and no kinder meant that we're going to, one of us has to stop working and be with him. So we had very different ideas of what it meant. So what that meant is that we needed to sit down and say, hey, this is what's happening. What does this mean for you? And then this is what we need to do with our partner. We need to say, what does it mean for you? And then listen to that, and what do you want and what do you need? And then the same goes for us. we need to share what it means for us, and then we need to negotiate the new parameters. And for us Victorians, that's for the next 5 days, potentially longer. And at any time in our lives when the situation changes, we need to consider these parameters. When we have a baby, when somebody starts a new job, when we move house, when we go on holidays, that whenever things change, it's so important to just head it up with a conversation around what are the parameters, what does this mean for you, get an idea of what their picture is, of what their assumptions are, and share yours, and then find where there's a match. And then where there's the mismatch, that's when we need to kind of negotiate and work out how we're going to make it work. Oh my God, it changes everything. It's a huge one. The second tip I want to give is that when we are forced into a changed situation with our partners, and I mentioned before, we can feel like we're trapped because it's not a chosen situation. We go into fight or flight. This is quite scary, or scary is the wrong word. This can be quite confronting, challenging, and it can bring up a lot of stuff. So we need to recognize that, we are in a situation that has the potential to trigger trauma. So let's set that at the outset as well. And let's recognize that this is what we're doing and be kind and gentle. A lot of us have, lockdown fatigue or trauma fatigue, where we're just so over it that we feel like we shouldn't have to have these, these boundaries in place to hold ourselves and to hold our partners, but we still do. That's a reality. And one way, so saying this up front, recognizing it, speaking it up front, and then also remembering that we're going to be triggered. We're going to be, our fight or flight's turned on, either internally or externally. It's being turned on. So we're going to be in a reactionary mode. We're going to be triggered. This is going to, and being with your intimate partner when you're already in this kind of a state is going to bring things up, and we're going to project that over to our partner if we're not careful. So we need to really remember that whatever we're feeling, whatever I'm feeling in relation to what he's doing, even if it's like this stupid thing that he does all the time that annoys me, or it's something that's really wrong that he does that is wrong, like the way he speaks to our son, let's say, for instance, and I can see that it's actually not right. Whatever it is, we need to really take a moment to own it, step back and say to ourselves, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Like when this happens, I feel this way. So when you speak to me like that, I feel angry and I feel sad, and just leave it at that. Just leave it at that. Because what that does is it means that we own how the behavior of that person is making us feel, and it gives them the space to actually recognize it and want to change it, want to care for you, want to say, oh, I'm sorry, how can I help? And vice versa. If our partner is able to say, instead of our partner saying something like, one that my husband has said is that when I say that he's done something, that something's done and needs to be done differently, I have a little laugh. I go, oh, like that. And it really pisses him off. Now, at first he would say to me, I hate it when you make fun of me like that. And I'm like, I'm not making fun of you. So when he stopped and stepped back and took responsibility for how he was feeling instead, he got a really different response. So, initially he says, you're making fun of me. And I'm like, no, I'm not making fun of you. So that's not the response he wants, right? Like if he feels like he's being made fun of and my response is, no, I'm not, that doesn't feel nice. So when he was able to stop and take a step back and recognize, oh, okay, actually, let's not tell her what she's doing. Let's instead talk about how I'm feeling. So he said, I feel criticized. When you do that, I feel criticized. Now, those of you who've worked with me will know that I would normally say, if you were a client, criticized isn't a feeling, but in this case, it works. He says, I feel criticized. And when he said that, I just went, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want you to feel criticized. It's not a criticism. I love you. And then I kind of went, how can I tell you when something needs to be done differently? How can I tell you that so you don't feel that way? And he said, well, if you just kind of say it plain up, that's going to make me feel a lot more empowered. And I'm like, in myself, I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. I can do that. Whereas the other way that it's being communicated, which is when you do that, you're criticizing me, or when you're putting me down, or whatever it is. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Then we're just going to have an argument because and we're not going to get the response that we want. We're not going to get the love that we're looking for and the tenderness. So let's bring it back to being in lockdown, and we're going to be around our partner a lot. We're going to be triggered a lot, and we're going to need to have this tool. So let's say they're not listening the way that you want them to, or they're dismissive when you're speaking to them. Okay, we've been there for 5 days. We're on day 5, and your reaction is to say, you don't care, you don't listen to me. That's not going to be helpful, because you're telling them what their behavior is. Now, that may or may not be their behavior or the intention behind their behavior. The response you're going to get is defensive. What you really want in that situation, when I'm feeling like he's not listening and he doesn't care, what I want is to feel like he cares. So instead, I need to stop and say how I'm feeling when that happens. So if that's happening, I stop and I say, I'm feeling really hurt, or I'm feeling unheard right now. And then say nothing. I guarantee you your partner's response is going to be a lot more loving and a lot more tender, because they want you to feel good. So these are my 2 tips for these next 5 days in lockdown, for those of us who are in lockdown, and for those of us who are in much more longer, more enduring lockdown in other parts of the world. And also at any time in our relationship where we find there's a change of situation or a change of structure, a change of pattern. First thing is stop, speak to each other, and have a chat about what the changing parameters are. Oh, we're now in lockdown for 5 days. What does it mean for you? Inquire of your partner, and then share what it means for you, and find where there's the match, and then find where there's the mismatch and negotiate those mismatches. And the second thing is to remember that you're going to be triggered. It's normal, it really is. And the best way to approach it is to recognize that your trigger is a feeling within yourself, and you can share that feeling with them and then let them respond from there. Make sure we're not telling them what they're doing or criticizing their behavior, because we don't know what the intention is behind the behavior. But the truth is, for me or for you, that there is a real feeling, and that's what can be shared. That gives them the opportunity to care for you, and vice versa. Good luck, everybody. It's not that long. We can do it.